Hello guys, welcome back to my video series where I'm going to show you how to build what I consider the best and fastest gaming PCs for specific price categories. And today with the fastest gaming PC you can currently assemble for about $700. And of course I think it's important to note that this channel is not sponsored by anybody and neither is this video, so I'm completely free of bias and can really recommend what I think is the best hardware that you can currently buy. And so with this exact build I can guarantee you that you can expect to get a lot of value for your money. But now let's not waste any more time and let's dive directly into the parts for our $700 gaming PC build. First, in my opinion, the best processor in this price segment has usually been the AMD Ryzen 5 1600. It has 6 cores with 12 threads and up to 3.6 GHz, which is really good even for today's incredibly high standards. This processor has consistently performed well, and in this build and in all the games that I tested, I was never bottlenecked by this CPU, which means that the processor was never the reason why I was capped at a certain frame rate. Now in Cinebench, where professionals usually test CPU performances, we can also see that this CPU gets really solid results with 2698 points. The temperatures during all the benchmarks and gaming tests were also very stable, and that means that the stock cooler that is included is pretty good and we don't need to waste any money on an extra cooler, which is really good. Unfortunately, we live in times where hardware parts are short in supply and prices have gone up, especially for parts that are very popular like this processor. In April, this processor did cost about $100 and was by far the best processor in its price segment. And I still see it for less than $120 here and there, but things have changed and its price got increased dramatically throughout the last weeks. While at the same time, its successor has been at a decent price still. So if you don't find it for less than $120 or you don't want to wait a few weeks for your gaming PC, then the Ryzen 5 2600 is the best alternative on the market for this price segment. So let's come to the graphics card. In my opinion, the graphics card with the best value for money in this price category is the GeForce RTX 1660 Super. And for my own build, I preferred specifically the 6GB OC version from Gigabyte. This GPU is a real powerhouse. It is less than 1 year old and much better than its predecessor. It is up to 1785 MHz, 6GB GDDR6 and more than 150 gigaflops in 64-bit systems. And because it is so new, it has all the latest NVIDIA technology in it and it crushes benchmarks in its price category. And in my own tests, I was also very happy with the performance I got, but I will show you the results later in this video. Of course, we also need a solid motherboard that perfectly supports the Ryzen 5 and our Radeon RX 580. And for that, I recommend the MSI B450M Pro VDH Max. This is my personal favorite when it comes to motherboards. It supports all the frequencies that we need for all the other hardware parts I recommend in this gaming PC build. With the B450 socket, it's also future-proof and will provide support for future Ryzen generations. But not only that, it also provides the ability to overclock CPU and GPU. It has all the connectors that we need and want, and of course, it is extremely cheap for what it provides. And so overall, I personally think this is probably the most cost-efficient hardware part in this whole build and therefore highly recommended. When it comes to the memory, I would recommend buying two 8GB RAM blocks from Corsair with 3200 MHz. A few years ago, 8GB of RAM was usually very much sufficient, but more and more games are relatively RAM hungry, which means nowadays I can only recommend 16GB of RAM in the mid-range to high-end gaming PCs. For the SSD, I chose the PNY CS900 with 480GB. As you know, I recommend this SSD in all my mid-tier gaming PC builds because it's very reliable, extremely cheap and sufficient for a great gaming experience. As always, the Corsair CX450 provides the power for our gaming PC. This nice and quiet power supply offers a good quality and all necessary protection circuits. In my case, I bought the modular version which provides better cable management. But it doesn't really make a huge difference, so you can either buy the modular or the non-modular version. However, I usually suggest buying whatever is cheaper at the moment. And for the case, we use the AeroCool Cylon. It offers enough space for all the parts and also comes with a pre-installed fan which provides enough airflow for our very efficient components. In addition, it provides great cable management, 3 USB ports on the top side and an awesome design. And of course, in terms of price-performance ratio, this case is top-notch. Next up is a short 3-minute building guide of how to build the $700 gaming PC. First, we need our motherboard, which has a socket for the processor in the middle. Here we pull the lever of the socket to the side and then all the way up so that we can attach our processor. To do that correctly, the socket has an arrow in one of its corners, and we have to align it with the arrow that you can see here in the corner of the processor. So align it and let it drop into the socket, but don't push it in because we don't want to bend any pins. If you aligned it correctly, it will drop in automatically. After we've done that, we can now pull the lever back to its place. Next up is the cooler for our processor. On the backside, the cooler already has some paste attached to the square that needs to be pressed on top of our processor. To fix it then to the motherboard, we use these 4 screws and we screw them in here, here, here and here. But first we have to unscrew the protection and remove it. And after we have done that, we can place the cooler on top of the processor. But be careful here, the AMD label should be on the left side so that we have enough space on the right side for our RAM. Now we screw it on tight and our cooler is attached. What's left is the cooler power connector, and this should be put on the CPU fan 1 connector of our motherboard. Now that we have done that, we want to attach the motherboard to the case. In general, motherboards come in different sizes and therefore every case has some fixed female screws and some optional ones. And for the motherboard that we use here, we should put in 4 additional ones. Here, here, here and here. And of course, before we attach our motherboard, we should also install our I/O shield. Just press it into the back of your case and don't be afraid, it usually takes a little bit of pressure. After we've done that, we can finally put in the motherboard, align it with the I/O shield and the screws and fix it with these. In the end, it should look like this, with the screws fixed in these places. Next up is the RAM. For the installation, we open the DIMM slots A2 and B2 by pressing the retaining clips outward, and then we push the blocks in by making sure that we line up the notch of the RAM blocks with a break on the slots. Now take the connector of the fan and attach it to the system fan 1 slot. After that, we can finally install our graphics card. The way we do that is we first remove these 2 screws from the backside of the case. Then we take off the bracket and the cover in slot 1 and 2. Now we can install the graphics card by pushing it into the PCI Express slot here. And then we can fix it with the bracket. The power supply needs to be put into the bottom part of the case, preferably with the fan pointing downwards. Here we can fix it with another 4 screws. After the power supply has been installed, we can now connect the power connectors for the motherboard, the processor and the graphics card. And now we can connect all the case cables, and we start with the HD audio connector that has to be put into the J-OD1 slot. After that, we connect the 3 USB ports, the 2 small USB 2 connectors and the large USB 3 connector. The connectors for the front switches and the LEDs are somewhat customizable, but you can find a description of how to connect them in the manual for the motherboard. However, the pins for them are here. Now the only case connector that's left is the SATA connector for the large front LED, and you want to connect that to the power supply. After we've done that, the only thing that's left is the SSD. This is the place inside the case where you can install the SSD. The SSD has to be connected to the SATA port and the power supply. And then you can mount it to the case via screws on the backside. And after you've done all these things, you're finally finished and can now close the case and enjoy your PC. And now, as promised, let's jump into the benchmarks and game tests. I tested this gaming PC in the 3D Mark Time Spy benchmark and then in the games League of Legends, Fortnite, Call of Duty Warzone, Witcher 3, Path of Exile and Valorant. By the way, I usually test what I think are the most popular games right now, but if you think I should include some other games to my tests, please write in the comments so that I know what you would like to be tested in the future. Anyways, in 3D Mark Time Spy, this gaming PC build scores 6,197 points, while the graphics score is 6,346 and the CPU score is 5,471. What we can see here is that this PC is very well balanced, with the GPU being a little bit stronger in general, which is usually optimal when it comes to gaming PCs. In the predecessor benchmark called Firestrike, we get 14,854 points, which is also really good. This result is also better than 75% of all gaming PCs that have ever been tested. Now when it comes to the game tests, I have to note that all the tests were done with the recording software in the background and on a 1080p screen. So if you play in Full HD without a recording software, you should expect a performance that's a little bit better, while you should expect fewer FPS if you play on a screen with a higher resolution. But now let's start with the game tests. Now these were all the game tests, so overall I would say that if you want to copy this gaming PC build, you would definitely have a lot of fun playing lots of games at very high settings. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video very helpful. If you do so, you can always leave a like to show some support. And of course, if you're new to this channel, you can also subscribe so that you can always easily find some great gaming PC builds that are optimized for gaming performance and price.